I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. Friday evening, I saw a news flash that the Silicon Valley Bank was facing some difficult financial times that they were not capitalized, that somehow or another their earnings and their losses were greater than their capitalization, and that there were several $billions in the red. And that it was the 16th largest bank in America. I never heard of the doggone thing before, if you ask me. And that the feds were looking at, I think it was early Friday. Then by the weekend, Friday night, I think, the Federal Deposit Insurance Company of the U.S. Treasury or somebody shut the bank down. And you know how the feds come in, they took over everything and began to calculate that the bank was insolvent. And they put a sign outside the door Saturday morning, I think it was, that the bank is closed until further notice. And so the news broke that a bank, the second largest bank failure in American history, happened this weekend. And though I'd never heard of the Silicon Valley Bank, it's a bank out there with, Silicon Valley, but they have branches across America. They got branches. They got one in Wellesley, Massachusetts, I understand. They got other branches. It's a large bank. It isn't Wells Fargo. It's not Chase Bank, and it's not some of these other big banks that you may hear of, but it's a large bank, and it's right out of money. And the depositors, a lot of the deposits they have is a startup money, because a lot of people out there in Silicon Valley are into this whole business of tech startup. And so they put a lot of the deposits in there into the Silicon Valley Bank, and they did not have enough money to cover. The Federal Deposit Insurance Company covers, I think, the average depositor in a bank up to $250,000, you're good. But if you got more than $250,000 in a bank, the Federal Deposit Insurance Company don't cover that. So you got to put, can't have all your eggs in one basket. You got to spread it around. So you got $1 million in the bank. If that bank goes belly up, which is what SVB did, you're going to lose $750,000. So a lot of people had more than $1 million in that bank. So there's stories, and I think Janet Yellen, who's a Treasury Secretary, made a statement on yesterday that the federal government was not going to bail out this bank the way it did in the 2008 financial crisis. If you remember back when that was taking place, Wall Street was going belly up, AIG went belly up, Warner, Lehman Brothers went belly up. Goldman Sachs got bailed out, I think. So the problem is that banking is I suppose, I'm not a banker, so don't quote me on any of this. But I think that what they were doing is that because of Jerome Powell, who's a Fed, he had been raising the rates like crazy, interest rates, and the bank itself was not prepared to deal with the interest rates that were being applied by the federal government. So when they borrowed money from the federal government, see what the banks do, they get money from the federal government and they loan it to you, or they make loans or whatever they do. They pay in the interest and they charge you an interest on the interest above the interest that, I think that's how they do that, right? Anyway, the money that they had and the interest on the money that they had borrowed was greater than what they had in their pockets in the bank, if I'm explaining this correctly. And I'll stand corrected because I'm not a banker. I'm not even mildly an economist, but I try to do my best. So the Fed shut the bank down. It's closed now. And a lot of people have more than $250,000 in that bank because they're running a business out there. And they figure, well, it's a good bank. It's a large bank. It's been around for a while. But the Fed, Janet Yellen said yesterday that they weren't going to bail the bank. That is to say, they were not going to pay all the people who had money in the bank, going to make sure they get that your money is not guaranteed beyond $250,000. So I don't know what they're going to do. The problem is that another smaller bank went belly up this morning. I forget the name of that bank. But it also went belly. So there are two banks that have gone belly up. When the banks, my brother and my sister, when banks start collapsing because they don't have money, the economy is in bad shape. Now, I don't expect Chase or Wells Fargo to go belly up, but Wells Fargo has been in trouble because they were lying. Wells Fargo was creating all kind of false accounts going back a few years ago, and what were they doing? They were doing the Donald Trump kind of thing. They were saying they had more assets than they had, and the government found out about it and penalized them. And so they're trying to get back in the works again. They may go up, but Wells Fargo we bank with, well, I tell you what we do. Somebody be looking for me trying to lay up. Anyway. So I think what I want to say after saying all of that, if it's anything at all meaning to you, is that means the economy is in bad shape. Don't be listening to that Joe Biden telling you that the economy is safe. Don't listen to that man. I'm telling you, I know he's the president, and I'm not an anarchist. I'm not an anti-U.S. Constitution. I'm not anti-American. I'm not woke. I'm not Black Lives Matter. Ain't none of that. I'm just telling you, don't listen to Joe Biden. When he gets out there and tells you that American economy is, and you need to watch your money too. Need to watch your money, because money gonna get tight. It already is tight, and the price of food is still high. And by the way, if I can just put this in, since I'm saying everything else, the price of food does not have to be as high as it is. There are just some people out there who are predatory. You got people in America today, they're just greedy. They're predatory. They could lower the price of food. People stop driving their cars. See, you can stop driving your car. You can stop taking Sunday drives, and you can stop running here and running there. And the price of gas went down because people stopped buying the stuff. They didn't. You don't have to buy gas for your car. But you got to buy them eggs. You got to buy that bread. You got to buy that milk. You got to do that. You got to eat, and they know it. And so they won't. And so I'm a capitalist. Let's put it this way. Well, I'm not a capitalist. Let me say that. What I do want to say is that I'm not against a profit and margin. People making money. I'm not against that. If you're running a business, you got to make money. Otherwise you're going to be out of business. I understand that. But there's some businesses that, like the food business now, they're making tons of money. Here, I'll give you another one. The Norfolk and Suffolk railroad line, we had that crash out there in Palestine, Ohio, made over $1 billion in profit last year, laid off over 1,100 workers going back a couple of years ago, fired 1,100 workers, put them on bread line because you got to pay a salary, you got to pay the man's taxes, got to pay government taxes, and you got to pay all kinds. So they didn't need they had all these employees. But they fired 1,100 employees, made $1 billion in profits last year, Norfolk Suffolk. Then they're going through this town called Palestine. Norfolk Suffolk has had 4 derailments in the last month. The biggest one was out there in Palestine. And I'll tell you this, where I am living in Palestine, I would not go home anymore. I would not, they said the same thing about here when the World Trade Center went down. Well, the dust is cleared, everybody's cleaned up everything, streets are clean, go back to work. Listen, for years, cancer and carcinogens were in the air. People got cancer, all kind of lung cancer, eye cancer, toe cancer, foot cancer, because of the World Trade Center. And the insurance companies are being sued left and right, and so is the city of New York. I'm telling you, if you know somebody who lives in Palestine, Ohio, tell them, don't go back to live there. Don't believe what the governor said. Don't believe what the Norfolk president, they asked that fellow the other day, if y'all going to buy these people's houses, because ain't nobody I know who's going to buy. If you want to move, let's say you're living in Palestine, you've been planning on, moving up to a bigger house with 3 or 4 bedrooms. You only got 2 bedrooms now. So you're going to figure, going to move to Cleveland or somewhere, or Pennsylvania, you're going to get a bigger house. But who going to buy that house now? Ain't nobody in their right mind going to buy a house out there in Palestine, Ohio. Not if they're in their right mind. So I would say to people, and I think the government ought to they got to make $1 billion Norfolk Suffolk. I think the government ought to make the Palestine Norfolk Suffolk Railroad buy all those houses. I don't have to buy 5,000 houses. What the house is worth, $50,000 each, $100,000. Buy all of them, pay the people off, and let them buy houses someplace else, and then put a quarantine in that area for the next 30, 40 years. That's what ought to happen. But they're poor people, they're poor people. I think the government, Joe Biden is treating the people of Palestine, Ohio, like they're black people or something, down in Natchez, Mississippi. Go back. They did down there in Tuskegee Institute, and they were down there popping them people with all that syphilis and gonorrhea down there years ago in Tuskegee. Y'all heard about that? And I didn't see nobody in Palestine, by the way, Ohio, that's black. I think everybody live out there is white. That's strange, too. Maybe they got some black people, I don't know. But they all been treated like they're black people out there. Yeah, it's safe. Go back and drink the water. You drink the water. Yeah, it's safe. Breathe the air. Yeah, bring your babies and take them to school and put them in the playground. All them dead fish, there's a creek that runs through Palestine. Every fish in the creek died. Every fish in the creek dead. Dead, stinking fish stinking to high heaven. All that chemical in the ground seeped into the ground. They had a thing like this up in New York several years ago called Love Canal. And then they got the thing down there at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, down there in my home state, where this cleaning company was dumping all this cleaning fluids into the water system around Camp Lejeune. It was going back 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And people are dying from cancer from that. So if you've seen the dead fish that they had out there, and if it killed the fish, and yet you say we get safe to, and the governor said it's safe to drink the water. Joe Biden says, what's his name? That boy that's transportation secretary, what I call him, Pete Booty. Pete Booty, who's the Secretary of Transportation, said, drink the water. So, man, you see the dead fish in the water? Yeah, the water's safe. Drink the water. Listen, I got to go. But I do want to say this, that Donald Trump is going to be indicted here in New York City by this district attorney named Alvin Bragg. I don't know what's going on. It's political. It's not about, and I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not trying to support Trump. I definitely ain't supporting Alvin Bragg, right? But something's going on. You know what I think? I think the reason why Alvin Bragg is indicting Trump is because the legislators, the Republican legislators got together down there in Georgia last week and voted to be able to remove Fani Willis, who's also going to indict Trump. Just like that, they can get rid of her and shut down that indictment of Trump in Georgia over that, 1,180 votes. So I think Alvin Bragg said, okay, all right, that's what you're going to do? Y'all, you people down there, you got your Republican power. We up in New York, we got Democrat power. I'm going to indict him just for spite. That's what I think. So we're going to see. It should happen. Probably should hear about the indictment probably this week. Definitely by next week. Trump going to be an indicted president. So we're going to be looking at entire America. America with closing banks, food prices through the roof. Joe Biden can't see, can't read the teleprompter. We're looking at some terrible, terrible times ahead of us. But thank God for Jesus. And thank God for you. I'm James Manning, everybody.